Oh, this is a department where only the elite gather. There's no seat here for an undereducated old man like you. Please return to your rural branch. I had just been transferred from a regional branch to the headquarters. Today was my first day stepping into my new department. However, the looks I received from the employees inside were cold. Everyone working in this department seemed to be young. They were probably all university graduates confident in their abilities. The younger employees, who clearly lacked respect for their seniors, openly looked down on me and laughed out loud. I simply shrugged at their attitude and said, "No need to worry. My seat is right over there." The seat I pointed to was by the window, the one reserved for the head of this department. Huh. My name is Kevin. I am a 55-year-old office worker. Ever since graduating from university, I've worked diligently my entire life. The company I work for is a major publicly traded firm that facilitates the buying and selling of stocks and bonds on the exchange. However, in today's world, every company is struggling to survive, and even someone like me, who has dedicated my life to my job and is nearing retirement, can't afford to relax. Fortunately, when I was a rookie, I had an exceptional mentor. Her name was Mary. Back then, I was just a cocky, clueless newbie, but he patiently taught me everything from the ground up. I know I have a stubborn personality, and I hate losing and never slack off. Most people would probably find someone like me too much of a hassle to deal with. But Mary saw potential in me and took the time to train me. No matter how many questions I asked, she never got annoyed, and she always made sure I fully understood. I wouldn't be where I am today without her, and I have nothing but gratitude. I've had mentors and part-time jobs during my student years and in various departments after job transfers. But not all of them were as admirable as Mary. However, as long as Mary is at the top of the company, I feel confident that I'll be fine as long as I stay focused on my work, allowing me to concentrate on the tasks at hand. Currently, I work at a regional branch. That morning, I was on my way to a client meeting in Tokyo. While heading there as usual, my phone rang. It was the president, Mr. York, from the headquarters. I quickly answered the call. "Kevin, is that you?" "Yes, Mr. York. It's been a while." "I believe you're in Tokyo today, correct?" "Yes, I'm heading to a client meeting right now." Then you're free around lunchtime, aren't you?" It seemed like he had already checked my schedule beforehand. His question was more of a confirmation than an inquiry. "Yes, I am." "Then how about having lunch together?" I pictured Mr. York's round, cheerful, and fortunate-looking face. The thought alone brought a natural smile to my face. "Yes, I'd be honored to join you for lunch." With that, I wrapped up my work for the morning. When I finally met Mr. York after a long time, he looked as lively and healthy as ever. However, I had learned from experience that letting my guard down because of his friendly appearance would be a grave mistake. I returned his smile, but made sure to stay sharp. "Kept you waiting, didn't I?" "No, not at all. Let's have lunch first. The grilled dishes here are exquisite. I'm looking forward to it." Mr. York quickly ordered for both of us, and soon a beautifully presented, luxurious lunch was brought to our table. During the meal, we casually talked about his family, my branch's performance, and industry trends. Maybe it's just a professional habit, but conversations always seemed to drift toward work whenever we met. That being said, it might be a problem if I end up being able to talk about personal matters with Mr. York. After finishing the final course, a light dessert, and as soon as the table was cleared, Mr. York leaned back and said, "Well then." I tell myself, "Here we go," and mentally switch into work mode. "I know you've been doing great at the branch, but to tell you the truth, I've been struggling with something." "Yes?" "I need you to come back, even if it's just temporarily." For most people, a transfer from a branch to headquarters would be an honor, a cause for celebration. But when I looked back at Mr. York, who was saying he was worried while wearing a big smile, I felt my mood sink into gloom. Still, since this was coming directly from him, I knew this wasn't a request. It was a decision. Again, I thought to myself, accepting the inevitability of corporate life, I resigned myself to my fate and took the assignment. 1 month after receiving the transfer order from Mr. York, I headed to headquarters. It's lively here. Although I had visited before for work, I usually left immediately afterward, so I had forgotten how bustling it was. I couldn't deny that the lively cityscape lifted my spirits a little. Not everyone in the crowd looked like they were filled with hope, but their trendy outfits and cheerful expressions suggested a certain optimism. I wanted to keep my own smile too, but knowing what awaited me, my mood took a nosedive. Shaking off the sinking feeling as best as I could, I stepped into the headquarters building. I kept my conflicted emotions hidden, maintaining a blank expression as I headed to my destination floor. As I walked to the department Mr. York assigned me to, I started to feel a bit more at ease. One reason for that was probably because I ran into a few familiar faces along the way. "Oh, Kevin? It's been a while." "Huh? Kevin? Good to see you again." I raised a hand in greeting. Seeing old colleagues smile as they called out to me was genuinely heartwarming. Chatting with them and exchanging light banter slowed me down, and although I had planned to arrive early, I ended up cutting it close. I wasn't late, so it was fine, but before stepping into my new department, I took a deep breath. All right, with renewed determination, I lightly knocked on the door. "Excuse me." As soon as I stepped in, the chatter that had been audible from outside instantly stopped. Dozens of employees turned to look at me one after another. Some were surprised, some looked confused, and some glared outright. In the heavy silence, the only sound was the hum of the printer. "Huh?" I thought. Judging by their reactions, it seemed they hadn't been informed about my arrival. I straightened my posture, standing tall. "My name is Kevin. As of today, I have been transferred from the branch office and will be working here. I look forward to working with all of you." I made sure my introduction was loud enough for everyone to hear. The beginning is always the most important part. Seeing that everyone had accepted my presence, they returned to their respective tasks. They didn't seem particularly interested in me. Still, I made sure to greet each employee properly, starting with those closest to the entrance. This was the Systems Development Department responsible for managing the company's internal infrastructure. Many of the employees here seemed a bit introverted. However, I didn't sense any hostility toward me, despite being a transfer from a branch office. "Looking forward to working with you." "Yeah, do your best." But as I moved further inside, I started encountering employees who were more condescending and arrogant. As I approached the desks near the windows where the higher-ups sat, I heard mocking voices behind me, deliberately loud enough for me to hear. "So he's from the branch office. A country bumpkin just arrived. What use does an old guy have in the headquarters? Can you even use a phone? Wait, do you even have one? Still using a flip phone? Stop it. He can hear you." Loud, sneering laughter followed, clearly meant for me to hear. It felt like childish bullying. I chose to completely ignore the noise. Engaging with them would only entertain them and encourage their behavior. Lifting my head, I stopped in front of a middle-aged man sitting at the far right desk by the window reading a newspaper. "Hi, I'm starting today. Looking forward to working with you." But the man didn't even glance up from his newspaper. "Yeah, good for you." Without looking at me, he tossed out a brief response. I shifted my gaze to the desk on the left. The man there looked to be in his late 20s, a younger employee. "I'm Kevin. Nice to meet you." "I'm Jacob." At least he gave me his name. But then Jacob smirked and said, "Long journey from the countryside, huh? Must have been tough." "Excuse me?" "Well, I think HR made a mistake, but man, I feel bad for you." Without waiting for my response, Jacob kept talking. The air in the city is different from the countryside, right? Just breathe in the headquarters air and head back, yeah? He spoke as if my very existence here was a mistake. The employees sitting in the row ahead of Jacob chuckled openly at me. They looked at me like I was just some unimpressive old man from the countryside, convinced they were superior. I mean, even with a staff shortage, hiring some washed-up old man? Come on, right? There's no way an old dude like this can even learn the job now. The branch office is just full of useless high school graduates, right? What is this company even thinking? They ran their mouths without hesitation, and there wasn't a hint of respect towards someone older. There was no professional courtesy and no sense of welcoming toward a new colleague. Even though Jacob was clearly in a leadership position, he made no effort to stop his subordinates' rudeness. I said nothing in response, but that seemed to only embolden them further. This department is where future executives are groomed. Most of us here graduated from top universities like K University or our university. Do you get that? Each time Jacob spoke, his subordinates snickered. With the branch office's standards, you're a little out of place, don't you think? We don't even have a desk for you. Why don't you just head to HR now and decide whether to go back to your branch or just quit? Ha! They laughed mockingly. I forced a smile, lifting the corners of my mouth. There's no need to worry about that. My desk is. I pointed to the desk in the center by the window, the one that currently sat vacant but belonged to the highest-ranking person in this department. Right here. On the desk sat 2 cardboard boxes, likely delivered in advance. I walked around to the other side, peeled off the tape, and pulled out my favorite pen holder. I had been using this pen holder for years, and having it on my desk always gave me a sense of calm. It was almost like a trusted companion. As I continued unpacking my belongings, the younger employees stared at me in stunned silence. Huh? The murmuring of the employees caught the attention of the man at the desk on the right, the one who had been buried in his newspaper until now. He finally looked up and stared at me. Huh? Oh, wait, you, Kevin? Yeah, that's me, Alexander. Oh man, Kevin. Long time no see. Alexander laughed loudly as he walked over to my desk. Took you long enough to notice. I greeted you earlier, didn't I? Huh? Oh, haha. All you do is read the newspaper instead of working. You getting paid just to sit around? Alexander and I were old colleagues, joining the company at the same time. Because of that, I spoke to him casually, making no effort to hold back. The lazy demeanor he had moments ago was gone. Alexander burst out in loud, hearty laughter. Come on, don't be like that. You think I can get motivated when these clueless kids are running the place? That carefree, irresponsible attitude. I had missed it. Jacob, the so-called leader of these clueless kids, stood there speechless for a moment before snapping back to reality. Wait a second, Alexander. Surely you don't mean us when you say clueless kids, do you? We're on the company's elite track after all. It seemed Jacob had quite the ego. But Alexander didn't even acknowledge his words, and he just scoffed. Huh? You guys think you're elite? Don't make me laugh. Alexander let out another loud laugh, then smugly patted my shoulder and made a bold declaration as if it had anything to do with him. This guy, Kevin, didn't just buy his way into some top-tier school like you brats did. He graduated top of his class from T University, the best university in the country. Wait, T University? Top of his class, no way. And not just that. You remember that scandal-ridden branch office from a few years back? The one that completely tanked? The third-party committee named Kevin as the only person who could fix it. Even Mr. York personally bowed his head and asked him to go. He spoke with a ridiculous amount of pride about my achievements. You get it now? You spoiled rich kids with mommy and daddy's money barely count as chicks. I'd call you eggs at best. Alexander puffed up like he had done something impressive himself. While I was busy being exasperated at his shameless bragging, another familiar face walked in. Jason, another old colleague of mine, entered with a group of subordinates. Kevin, it's been too long. Jason, finally, you're back. We've been waiting for you. Relieved to see him, I smiled and shook his hand. Yeah, it's just a transfer for now, though. I'm still technically with the branch office. I'll be counting on you. Jason worked in a different department where he held the title of department head and executive officer. He was also an alumnus of K University, the same prestigious university from which Jacob and his crew had graduated. In other words, he was their senior. Sensing the strange atmosphere in the room, Jason took a moment to observe. Then, after thinking for a bit, he locked eyes with Jacob and his group. His expression was unreadable, calm but cold. Kevin may have been away from headquarters for a while, but he's an exceptional employee. I trust you all gave your new superior the proper welcome? Jason's words could be taken as a threat. Where did all their confidence from earlier go? Jacob and the others lowered their heads, avoiding eye contact, breaking into a cold sweat without saying a word. Oh, they welcomed him just like they always do, right? Alexander grinned with amusement. They mistook Kevin for a high school graduate who got in from a branch office. So they told him, we're elites, future executives. You don't belong here, you clueless idiot. Go back to your branch. Quit. Jacob's words were exposed exactly as they were. Upon hearing Alexander's report, Jason's expression turned serious as he stared intently at his juniors. The usual noise in the office died down and an eerie silence took over. Just like you always do? Yeah, they work new hires to the bone with unnecessary early mornings and overtime. If someone transfers in, they nitpick their education or faction alignment to drive them out. Even supervisors get the cold shoulder from the whole group or get reported multiple times until they're demoted. It's just the same cycle over and over again. Oh, they've got some kind of misplaced pride, but they're so picky about their tasks that they barely deliver any results. On top of that, their attitude stinks, so clients constantly complain. Even when they're warned, they don't listen at all. Jason's face stiffened at Alexander's response. I had already been briefed on this department's situation, but hearing it firsthand made it sound even worse. But right now, Jason seemed even angrier than I was. He let out a deep sigh, bottling up his quiet rage. Elites, huh? You're just standing on the foundation built by your parents at home and by us in this company. And yet, with brains like that, you actually thought you'd make it to upper management? His words were sharp, cutting down the junior employees with cold disdain. Jacob and the others, realizing they had been abandoned by their supposed safety net, could only stand there, pale and frozen. Thanks to Jason stepping in earlier than expected, my job at headquarters was off to a smooth start. The task given to me by Mr. York. It was to put out the fire caused by the growing, toxic rivalry among young employees, which had started to interfere with operations. Apparently, I was now seen as someone in charge of crisis and risk management. That perception stemmed from my past, specifically when I exposed fraudulent data manipulation at a branch office years ago. At the time, the fraud was severe enough to threaten the company's very survival. The fact that it went undetected for so long was an issue in itself, but as soon as Mr. York ordered me to act, I flew to the branch to handle it. The mastermind behind the fraud was the then Vice President, Spencer. My first move was to have Spencer and the executives involved take responsibility and resign, along with filing lawsuits for damages. It became a huge news story spreading far and wide, but what drained me the most was the internal investigation that led up to it. And that was only natural. After all, I had to investigate my own colleagues, which led some employees to whisper behind my back, calling me a traitor. A complete lack of ownership. A complete lack of compliance awareness. A complete lack of professional ethics. There was no saving them. That's why, even if they saw me as a traitor, I refused to falsify my reports and submitted everything as it was. To the public, this honesty was seen as a sign of the company's integrity. The company ended up exhausting nearly all of its retained earnings, assets accumulated through internal profits rather than loans or shareholder investments. Talented employees left as well, but in the end, we avoided a buyout and the company still stands today. Compared to back then, at least a cleaner system remains, and that's something. Once all the investigations were over, I returned to headquarters and gathered all employees to report the branch office scandal openly. What exactly had gone wrong? What were the people involved thinking? How did the company respond? This wasn't some distant issue, and it had happened in our own company. By hearing the truth from someone who had witnessed it firsthand, even the younger employees who weren't there felt it was their problem too. I also shared my own mistakes from when I was younger. When I first joined the company, I was no different from those who caused this scandal. I was an arrogant young guy who thought my skills made me better than everyone else. I truly believed that relying on others would lower my work quality. Looking back, I can't help but feel ashamed of how ridiculous I was. I refused to acknowledge managers and seniors who I thought had lower IQs than me. I tried to do everything alone and failed. I must have looked absolutely pathetic. That was when I finally realized how foolish I had been all along. When I reached the point where I actually needed help, no one was willing to lend me a hand, not after how I had acted, spoken, and treated others. And that was fair. But even then, there was one person who still helped me. Can you guess who? I asked, but the younger employees all shook their heads. It was a temp worker, a woman I had looked down on more than anyone else. Because of her family situation, she couldn't even finish school properly. But even as a temp, she was far more capable than I was and had actually been assigned to mentor me. She was the person I respected the most, Mary. Since she was nearing retirement, she probably couldn't just stand by and watch a foolish, arrogant young man who had nothing but his academic background. Mary taught me over and over again, listen, Kevin, relying on your colleagues isn't a bad thing. That was the most important lesson when it came to working in a company. I learned from Mary not just how to do my job, but how to work with people. And I realized that everything I had valued up until then was completely misguided. It took hitting rock bottom for me to finally understand that. Among the young employees listening to my story, a few looked genuinely moved. As for Jacob, who had been the leader of the younger group, he had been thoroughly disciplined by Jason and the other senior employees. Since then, he never brought up academic backgrounds again. According to Alexander, it's probably because he realized that when someone even more competent is right in front of him, bragging becomes pointless. And as for Alexander, who once had the luxury of leisurely reading the newspaper at work, he was now assigned tasks more fitting for a managerial role. I was hoping to graduate from fieldwork, you know. Despite his complaints, he was now running all over the office every day, leading the younger employees. Jacob's group underwent individual interviews. Through in-depth discussions, we assigned them roles that suited their abilities. Since they were originally good at working alone, I set up a system that encouraged them to build stronger connections upward rather than laterally. As a result, through conversations in their work, they gradually learned how to interact with me as their superior. At first, Jacob resented having to follow orders. But when he discovered that I built my own PCs and developed programs and apps on my own, his condescending attitude vanished completely. For me, it was just a hobby, but to Jacob and his generation, it was apparently something impressive. And today, as I prepared to wrap up my work, I once again spoke to my team, who were now attentively listening. I plan to return to the branch office, where change is still resisted, and continue pushing forward. But I want you all to understand how valuable it is to be in an environment where people can change. Always anticipate those changes and dedicate yourselves to your work. Change can be good or bad. No one will teach you that, so it's something you have to realize on your own. I also deliberately brought up Jacob's initial attitude toward me. Now, he and the others were mature enough to acknowledge and be ashamed of their actions, and they took pride in the changes they had undergone since then. I told them that realizing those changes was what truly mattered. And with that, my assignment at headquarters came to an end. Alexander, who used to waste time, has grown into a reliable manager, and I've made sure that the younger employees who were my biggest concern understand where they should take pride in their work, so I have no regrets. With Jacob and the others, who had been at the center of the issue Mr. York was worried about, changing for the better, the younger generation at the headquarters began interacting beyond departmental and age boundaries. As a result, not only the system development department, but the entire headquarters became more dynamic in a positive way, earning Mr. York's full approval. Thank you for everything. I bid farewell at my now neatly organized desk and stepped out of the department, only to find an unexpected silence. Curious, I turned around. Everyone in the department was bowing deeply. Recalling how they had treated me on my first day, I felt a lump in my throat at how much they had grown. Looking around at them, I nodded firmly. Keep up the good work. Do your best. With those parting words, I left headquarters with confidence and satisfaction.